You've seen them on TikTok, right? Two brothers, looking almost like 90s heartthrobs in pastel sweaters. Then you find out what they did. They murdered their parents. And now people are saying they should be free. It sounds wild, doesn't it? For decades, Lyle and Eric Menendez have been the poster boys for cold-blooded patricide. The story we all heard was simple. Two greedy, spoiled rich kids who couldn't wait for their inheritance, so they blew their parents away with shotguns in their Beverly Hills mansion. They were convicted. They got life in prison without the possibility of parole. Case closed. But here we are, more than 30 years later, and the Menendez brothers are all over the internet. Suddenly, headlines are popping up everywhere about new evidence, hearings, and resentencing. It's confusing, and it makes you wonder, wait, is this really happening? Are they actually getting out? That's the million-dollar question. And the answer is a lot more complicated than a 60-second video. So, let's sit down and actually talk this through. No complicated legal jargon, just the real, human story of what happened then, what's happening right now, and what it all means. And stick with me, because the new evidence they're bringing to the table, it comes from a place so unexpected, it could change everything you think you know about this case. The night that started it all. To understand where we are, we have to go back. Back to August 20th, 1989. Imagine a posh, quiet street in Beverly Hills. Inside a sprawling mansion, Jose Menendez, a wealthy entertainment executive, and his wife, Kitty, are watching TV. Their sons, Lyle, 21, and Eric, 18, are out. Later that night, Lyle makes a frantic 911 call. He's crying, hysterical. "Someone killed my parents. Someone killed my parents." Police arrive at a scene that's a word I can't even use here. It was a massacre. Jose and Kitty had been shot multiple times with shotguns at close range. It was brutal, personal, and screamed of overkill. But then, the brothers started acting strange. Just days after their parents' funeral, they went on a massive spending spree. We're talking Rolex watches, a new Porsche, expensive restaurants, and business investments. It looked bad. It looked like they were celebrating. It took months, but the police started closing in. The big break came when Eric, racked with guilt, confessed to his therapist. The therapist's girlfriend went to the police and bam, the whole thing blew wide open. The brothers were arrested. The motive, according to the prosecution, was simple: greed. They wanted their father's $14 million estate, and they didn't want to wait or scrust. The trial that shocked America. The first trial, in 1993, was broadcast live on Court TV. It was the O.J. Simpson trial before the O.J. Simpson trial. And it's where the brothers dropped their bombshell. Their defense? It wasn't about money. It was about survival. Lyle and Eric took the stand and told a story that was stomach-churning. They claimed their entire lives had been a living hell. They described their father, Jose, not as a successful businessman, but as a monster. A tyrant who subjected them to relentless, horrific sexual, physical, and emotional abuse, starting when they were just little kids. They painted their mother, Kitty, as a depressed, unstable alcoholic who knew about the abuse and did nothing to stop it, sometimes even participating in the cruelty. Their story was that on that night in 1989, they genuinely believed their parents were about to kill them, to silence them forever. They said Eric had threatened to expose his father, and they feared they wouldn't live to see the next day. So, they shot first. Think about that. The prosecution said it was cold-blooded murder for money. The defense said it was a desperate, terrifying act of self-defense, or at least a manslaughter committed by two kids so broken by trauma they couldn't think straight. The nation was divided. Who do you believe? The crybaby murderers, as the prosecution called them? Or the tortured victims their defense portrayed? The juries couldn't decide either. Both brothers had separate juries, and both juries deadlocked. They were hung. It was a mistrial, sans croissant, the trial that buried them. So, they had to do it all over again. The second trial started in 1996, but this time, things were different. The judge, Stanley Weisberg, made a crucial decision. He severely limited the abuse defense. He ruled that the jury wasn't going to hear most of the graphic, detailed testimony about the alleged abuse. He basically said that even if they were abused, it didn't give them the right to execute their parents. Without the why, all the jury saw was the what. 2 sons, 2 shotguns, 2 dead parents. A lot of money. This time, there was no deadlock. The verdict came back fast. Guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced them both to 2 consecutive terms of life in prison. No chance of parole, ever. And that, it seemed, was that. Lyle and Eric Menendez vanished into the prison system, sent to separate facilities destined to die behind bars. Case closed. Story over. Large Sanchi Wars. The TikTok factor. Fast forward 25 years. A new generation, armed with smartphones, stumbles onto the case, but they aren't watching it on grainy 90s court TV clips. They're seeing it on TikTok and YouTube, and this generation has a completely different understanding of words like trauma, abuse, and PTSD than people did in the 90s. They see clips of Eric's tearful, desperate testimony from the first trial, and they don't see a crybaby. They see a traumatized kid. They hear the stories of abuse, and it doesn't sound like a made-up excuse to them. It sounds tragically familiar in a post-#MeToo world. A massive online movement springs up. People start digging, re-examining the evidence, and asking a huge question. What if they were telling the truth? This social media storm is the backdrop. It's the cultural pressure. But it's not the legal reason things are changing. The bombshell that changed everything. So, what is the legal reason? What is this new evidence that has everyone talking? First, let's be clear. The brothers are not currently being resentenced. That's a rumor. What's really happening is that their lawyers have filed what's called a writ of habeas corpus. It's a fancy legal term that basically means you are holding my client illegally, and new evidence proves their conviction was unfair. They are asking for their convictions to be thrown out and for a new trial. A letter Eric wrote to his cousin, Andy, 3 years before the murders, talking about the abuse. This is important because it battles the prosecution's claim that they invented the abuse story just for the trial. The testimony of a man named Roy Rosselot. If that name sounds vaguely familiar, it's because Roy was a member of the popular 80s boy band, Menudo. In 2023, Roy came forward with a shocking claim. He alleged that when he was 14 years old, back in the 80s, he was sexually assaulted by Jose Menendez. Why? Because for 30 years, it was just the brothers' word against their dead parents. It was easy for the prosecution to paint them as the liars. But now, here's a third party. Someone totally separate from the family with no skin in the game coming forward and saying, no, what they said about their father? It's true. He was a predator. And he did it to me too. This is the first independent corroboration of their core claim. The brothers' lawyers are arguing that this new evidence destroys the prosecution's entire greed motive. They're saying, if the jury in the second trial had heard this, if they knew Jose Menendez was a proven predator, would they still have sent them to prison for life? Or would they have believed the abuse story? Let's be blunt. The legal system hates reopening cases this old. The hill they have to climb is more like a mountain. It is incredibly difficult to get a 30-year-old murder conviction overturned. The current district attorney in Los Angeles, George Gascon, has a special unit that specifically reviews old convictions to see if mistakes were made. This is a new development. The DA's office has confirmed they are reviewing the brothers' petition. This is not a guarantee. It's not even close. They could review it and say, nope, doesn't change anything. Petition denied. But it's a tiny crack of light in a door that has been sealed shut for 3 decades. If, and this is the biggest if in the world, if they do succeed, they won't just be let go. The best case scenario for them is that a judge throws out the old conviction and grants them a new trial. Or it's possible the DA's office could offer them a plea deal for a lesser charge, like manslaughter. If that happened, they would likely be resentenced to time served. They've already been in prison for 34 years. and they would be released. So no, they are not getting out tomorrow. But for the first time since 1996, their release is no longer a 0% chance. It's maybe a 1% chance. And that's a huge deal. This case was never simple. It was never just greedy kids. It was never just abused victims. It was and still is a dark, complex, and horrifying American tragedy. And now, 30 years later, we're all being forced to ask a really uncomfortable question. What do you think? After all these years, does this new evidence change anything for you? Does it make you see the case in a new light? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And if you want to stay updated on this story and get more deep dives into the cases you think you know, make sure you hit that subscribe button